Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're really glad you've joined us today because we are plunging into a mystery wrapped in silence. Seriously, imagine this. A famous artist, her life looks perfect, right?
Hmm.
Then she's found having brutally murdered her husband. And after that night, she never speaks another word.
Not one.
Total silence. The big question, echoing through all the material you've shared with us, is just why?
And the sources you've provided, they give us this truly unique vantage point. We're not just looking at, a news report. We have access to these intensely personal, almost stream of consciousness diary entries from the artist herself, Alicia Berenson.
Yeah.
And then juxtaposed with those, we have the professional notes and, frankly, some very raw personal accounts from the psychotherapist Theo Faber, who becomes consumed with getting her to talk again.
Exactly. So our mission of this deep dive is to take this stack of material you sent, piece together this really unsettling narrative, try to understand the minds of the key players, Alicia, Theo, even the people orbiting them, and pull out the most important nuggets of insight hidden in these pages.
Yeah, try to find the connections.
Ultimately, we want to try and uncover the chilling truth behind Alicia's silence and that horrific night. You might need a map, maybe a psycho-emotional compass, for the twists ahead. It's a journey into some very complex psychological territory.
Definitely.
Okay, so based on these sources, let's start by setting the scene. Let's look at Alicia Berenson's world before everything just shattered. Her diary entries from this time are fascinating.
They really are. And she resists calling it a diary, doesn't she? Says it feels pretentious.
Yeah, she tells herself she thinks in pictures, not words, which right there is a key insight into her artistic mind even before therapy really starts.
And yet she starts writing. Why? She admits, or seems to admit, it's mostly to reassure her husband, Gabriel. She calls him the love of her life, says he adores him. She's intensely focused on his well-being, his worry.
Which is maybe one of the first subtle hints, right, of a dynamic that becomes crucial later on.
Absolutely. There's this focus on managing his state.
And there's definitely a growing unease in those earlier entries too, isn't there? She mentions feeling watched, this sense of creeping paranoia. And there's that particularly chilling entry, July 14th, where she writes, she might know why she's writing, but just refuses to admit it to herself. It's like she senses something dark coming that she just doesn't want to face.
Exactly. And then, bam, the sources just throw us into the brutal aftermath. That stark description of the murder scene from her perspective. Blood everywhere, the knife.
And the deep cuts on her own wrists. It's such a sudden, violent break from the image she'd been presenting.
Completely.
And immediately after that horror, we see her start to process it through her art. The sources talk about her self-portrait, the one titled Alcestis.
Right, the Alcestis painting. This is like one of the earliest and maybe most significant clues into Alicia's state of mind after the event. You mentioned the myth.
Yeah, the Greek tragedy. Alcestis sacrifices herself for her husband, Admetus, gets brought back from the dead, and stays silent.
Exactly. And the painting shows Alicia herself, post-murder naked, scars on her wrists, just standing mute before a blank canvas, brush dripping red, paint, blood.
It's a direct reference.
Yeah.
What the sources seem to be asking is, why pick this figure?
Yeah.
Why Alcestis? Why the silence? Is it just trauma? Or is there something more deliberate in comparing herself to a woman who came back from death and chose not to speak?
It immediately makes you ask, what happened to her that felt like returning from death, and why that specific response, silence?
So we have Alicia, now defined by this silence in this cryptic painting. Then the sources shift focus, bringing in the man who becomes obsessed with unlocking her, Theo Faber. We learn he's 42, and his opening line about himself is pretty blunt. He became a psychotherapist, quote, because I was fucked up.
Quite the intro. And the sources, they do fill in some of that fucked up history, don't they? His childhood anxiety, possibly linked to his father. That really vivid memory of catching snowflakes, like a tiny moment of peace in all the misery. It paints a picture of a pretty deeply troubled past.
And he shares that harrowing detail about a college suicide attempt, the pain, vomiting, but also that stark realization that he survived. This background isn't just, color. The sources make it clear his own struggles are the engine driving his need to fix others.
Right. He sees brokenness and feels compelled to mend it, maybe hoping to finally mend something in himself.
He arrives at the Grove Psychiatric Unit where Alicia is. Interviews with Indira Sharma, the consultant. He mentions his experience at Broadmoor, dealing with extreme psychological distress.
And the director, the controversial Professor Diomedes, he hires him. Seems drawn to Theo's intensity, even though there are rumors the Grove might be closing.
But Theo isn't just looking for any job. He's looking for a specific patient. He feels this undeniable pull towards Alicia Berenson, who's described here as a broken shell. He's totally focused on making her his patient, convinced he's the one who can reach her.
And stepping inside the grove, through the descriptions and the sources, you really get a palpable sense of the place. It's stark, icy wind, bare trees, a deteriorating building, that musty smell.
Yeah, it sounds grim.
And the sounds are all about restriction. Slams and bolts and keys turning in locks. It's structured, sure, but it feels more like a prison than a place of healing.
We meet some of the staff there, too. Professor Diomedes, who calls the Grove his most successful marriage, runs it with this unorthodox style. Indira Sharma, she has this maternal calm, believes therapy is more than talking, which echoes Theo's old therapist, Ruth.
Then there's Christian, the psychiatrist. He's presented as more cynical, practical, a contrast to Theo's really intense psychological focus. And Yuri, the nurse, who initially seems, reliable and kind.
The sources give us these little snapshots of the daily routine, like the community meeting patients and staff together, and then it's abruptly disrupted, a patient throwing wooden spikes.
Yeah, it underscores just how volatile that environment must have been.
And Theo's first attempt to even engage with Alicia really highlights the challenge. He's waiting in this bare therapy room, feels like a prison cell, watching patients below. He sees Yuri approaching Alicia cautiously.
Describing it like approaching an unpredictable animal.
Exactly.
And Christian, the pragmatic one, voices the obvious skepticism. How can Alicia benefit from therapy if she doesn't talk? Diomedes gives Theo a pretty short leash, initially just 6 weeks, to show some results. It's clear a lot of people see Alicia as a lost cause.
There's also that incident in the canteen involving Alicia and another patient, Elif. Alicia smashes a plate, attacks Elif. Theo notes down that something about it didn't feel right to him.
Right. It's a small detail then, but the sources kind of flag it, hinting it's more complex than just a random outburst, maybe a hidden dynamic already playing out.
Okay, so recognizing that direct talk therapy isn't getting anywhere, Theo decides he needs to broaden his investigation. The sources show him pinpointing 2 key areas outside of Alicia's immediate silence: the Alcestis painting and her childhood.
Yeah, he plans to dig into her past, talk to people who knew her before the murder.
He starts with Yuri, the nurse. Yuri shares a little about his own life, divorced, engaged, adds a touch of humanity, maybe.
Yeah.
His take on Alicia's silence is really notable. She'll talk when she's ready. Ready for the truth?
Ready for the truth. Yeah, that carries a lot of weight, hinting at something beyond just the murder night facts.
And interestingly, Yuri asks Theo if he's married. The sources say this question seems to catch Theo off guard. A little detail, but maybe significant.
Could be. Next, Theo meets Jean-Felix Martin, Alicia's gallerist. Max, Gabriel's brother, suggested him. Jean-Felix claims he and Alicia were super close, thick as thieves, and he seems to really despise Max. His advice to Theo: let her paint. That's the only way she'll talk to you. Which is a crucial insight, right? That her art is her language.
Definitely.
But Theo also finds something about Jean-Felix hard to stomach. He wonders if the gallerist loved the painting, the commodity, more than the painter herself. A bit of that art world cynicism, perhaps.
He also talks to Max Berenson, Gabriel's brother. Theo observes that dynamic, Max had the brains, Gabriel the looks. Max starts out very lawyerly, discreet, lawyer's hat, Theo calls it.
Right.
But then he drops the pretense, puts on the brother's hat, and confesses this burning hatred for Alicia. I hated her. I loathed her. Which directly contradicts what he said earlier about liking her. That's a major red flag the sources highlight.
Huge contradiction.
Max also reveals Gabriel was adopted and mentions Alicia's past suicide attempt and overdose, which Gabriel covered up with a doctor's help. And Max gets really agitated when Theo asks about Alicia's will. Clearly, there's a lot of unresolved tension, maybe motives simmering there.
Definitely unresolved stuff. And finally, Theo meets Barbie Hellman, Alicia's neighbor. The sources paint this vivid, almost comical picture. A startled Barbie doll, lots of plastic surgery, drenched in Chanel No. 5, used to getting her own way.
Feels like quite the character.
She pushes against hospital policy, insists Alicia was innocent. She wasn't a killer. Claims Alicia confided everything in her. But then she hints at having evidence, but demands payment first. Gives him nothing substantial.
So less about information, more about highlighting maybe the superficial world Alicia sometimes inhabited and maybe felt suffocated by, living next door to. Well, that.
Exactly. It adds context to Alicia's life outside the studio.
So while Theo's digging into Alicia's past, interviewing all these colorful characters. The sources also show us this parallel story unfolding the crumbling of his own personal life.
Yeah, this is where it gets really intense for Theo himself.
We're introduced to his wife, Kathy. She's an actress rehearsing Othello. Interesting choice of play, maybe. Their home is described with new furniture, lilies, trying maybe a bit too hard to project that perfect domestic picture.
Seems like it. And Theo's history with marijuana comes up. Started in college for anxiety. His old therapist, Ruth, told him he'd stop when he didn't need it anymore, and he did, apparently, when he met Kathy, saw her as grounding him.
But the sources show him falling back into it. After a party for Kathy's friend Nicole, he feels isolated, alone, and starts smoking again secretly when Kathy's out. It's a coping mechanism, right? A way to escape. But it quickly turns into something darker.
And this is where things take a really painful turn for him. One night, feeling stoned after smoking too much, he goes through his usual sanitizing ritual to hide the smell and ends up checking Kathy's laptop.
Oh, boy.
He describes obsessively checking ad nauseum like a jealous husband. And then he finds them incriminating emails between Kathy and someone called Bad BOY22. The language is explicit. So horny for you. Feel like a slut.
Oof. The sources capture his reaction so rawly. Wrenching pain, vomiting, his whole secure world just collapsing like a house of cards. He feels like he's been living with a stranger, sees Kathy now as this frightened, fucked-up girl, a cheating liar.
Yeah.
He describes this numbness, eerily similar to his college suicide attempt. He ends up walking aimlessly, finds himself near his old therapist Ruth's house, but doesn't go in at first.
He does eventually visit Ruth late at night. She offers him sherry, makes it clear he's there as a friend needing support, not officially a patient anymore. He confesses about the marijuana relapse and finding the affair emails.
And Ruth's advice is just stark, direct. She warns him against trying to force happiness and tells him flat out, "She's destroying you, Theo. Leave her."
But what's so psychologically fascinating here is Theo's decision, despite Ruth's very clear warning. He decides not to leave Kathy. He rationalizes it, thinks it would be like tearing off a limb.
Wow.
He chooses to bury the truth, pretend he never saw the emails, try to make the marriage work, tells himself, I refuse to give in to this, I refuse to break down and fall apart. But this denial, it leads him down a really dark path.
He starts lying to Kathy, constantly analyzing her for deceit, becomes increasingly paranoid, spying on her emails, her phone, convinced she's meeting her lover during rehearsals.
His personal world is totally mirroring the psychological complexity he's dealing with professionally. His own dysfunction is starting to really drive his actions, becoming this crucial thread woven through the whole narrative.
Right. Okay, let's connect this back to Alicia and that Alcestis myth again. Theo digs deeper into Euripides' play, goes over the plot. Alcestis dies for her husband, gets brought back, stays silent. He's puzzling over why she'd be silent.
He discusses this with Professor Diomedes. They agree the myth is deeply relevant to Alicia, but Diomedes pushes Theo, why the silence? Is it relief, joy at being back, or is it something darker, like overwhelming terror or maybe rage?
That conversation really plants the seed, doesn't it? That Alicia's silence might not be passive withdrawal, but an active response to something profoundly disturbing.
Exactly.
So to truly understand Alicia, Theo knows he needs to uncover her childhood. The sources take us with him to Cambridge, visiting her cousin Paul Rose and his mother Lydia, who seems hostile, likely mentally ill.
Yeah, the scene sounds grim. Paul's house is dilapidated. Lydia is abusive, spits at Theo, calls Alicia a bitch. Paul seems stuck caring for his mother. His life kind of stalled after his own dad died and he moved in with Alicia's family.
And it's Paul who reveals the devastating childhood trauma. He recounts the night Alicia's mother died in an accident. Alicia was hiding. Her drunken father, Vernon Rose, was yelling for her from downstairs. And Paul heard him yell those words. The words that would just scar Alicia forever. I wish it were you. I wish you were dead.
Oh,
Alicia, hiding on the roof with Paul, heard it too, and she said chillingly, Dad just killed me.
That's just brutal. Theo's analysis, based on the sources, calls this psychic infanticide. It's not like official jargon, but the idea that this kind of emotional abandonment, this destructive wish from a parent, can be so overwhelming for a child.
It psychologically kills a part of them.
Yeah, burying that immense trauma and rage deep inside. Theo comes to believe this repressed childhood wound, this betrayal by the father figure, is the key. That the rage built up and was somehow, maybe unconsciously, directed years later at her husband, Gabriel, who'd become the most significant man in her adult life.
It reveals the potential root of her trauma, gives a framework for understanding the sheer depth of her silence. It's a crucial insight the sources lead us to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And despite all of Theo's personal chaos, despite the difficulty of working with a silent patient, breakthroughs do start to happen. His silent sessions with Alicia continue, and he finds this strange comfort in the quiet with her.
He starts talking to her, recounting details he's uncovered from her past, including that traumatic night on the roof, her father's devastating words. He tells her he believes this childhood trauma is why she was initially silent. Shock, overwhelm.
And then one day, she speaks. First time in therapy. She tells him she couldn't talk at first. It was like in a dream. Then she felt it was too late. And when Theo asks the crucial question, why start talking now? Her answer is simple and aimed right at him. Because of you. Because you came here.
That confirms it, right? His relentless focus on her, maybe seeing her pain mirroring his own somehow, finally broke through that barrier.
It's a monumental step. And it's followed by her giving him her diary, smuggled to him in her sketch portfolio.
Huge. A window into her mind.
Theo is understandably excited, thinks this is it, but when he brings it up, she just reverts to that blank expression. He notes the diary ends abruptly, leaves him feeling back at square one in some ways, but it also fuels this compulsion to investigate discrepancies he finds in there. He tells her, "I'm on your side, Alicia," a declaration that takes on incredible weight later.
Definitely. She also begins painting in art therapy after Theo gets her materials. The sources introduce Rowena, the art therapist, who's described as dismissive, clearly jealous of Alicia's talent, even calls her work something like, anyone can paint that.
Yeah, a little professional friction there.
But what Alicia paints next is incredibly revealing. It's that self-portrait at the Grove. It depicts the building burning down.
Right.
And Theo is in the painting, carrying her out. But the sources add this specific, chilling detail. Fire is licking at his ankles.
Ooh.
Theo interprets it as representing their therapy, him saving her, but he also notes that she was studying me while she painted it. That painting, combined with the Elif incident, it takes on a whole new meaning later.
Speaking of the Elif incident where Alicia attacked her for writing SLUT on the painting, Theo talks to Elif in the emergency ward. Elif, badly injured, tells him why Alicia attacked her. She says she told her the truth.
And what truth is that?
Elif says Alicia attacked because Elif told her, quote, that you're soft on her, referring to Theo. Theo is startled by this.
Okay, so this is critical insight the sources give us before the main reveal. It strongly implies Alicia wasn't just reacting to the defaced painting. She reacted to Elif's comment about Theo.
Which confirms she recognized him, was observing his behavior, reacting to his perceived favoritism. It proves she knew who he was all along.
Exactly. Which brings us to the twist. The sources lay the groundwork by revisiting those earlier diary entries from just before the murder. Alicia seeing that tall, well-built man watching her house in August. Jean-Felix warning her about trusting people. Paul calling, needing help, adding stress. Gabriel suggesting Dr. West.
And Alicia agreeing, but inwardly wishing she could shove the doctor downstairs.
Yeah.
She starts hiding her diary, gets more paranoid, suspects the watcher is Max trying to drive her crazy.
The sources build this tension, show her fear escalating. But the truly shocking truth revealed in her final diary entry, February 23rd, just upends everything we thought we knew.
She writes that Theo Faber was the man watching her house that summer. She recognized him later in therapy, something familiar, recognized his eyes, same smell, way he formed words. And he sealed it himself, didn't he? Gave himself away completely by using the exact same phrase in therapy that he used to her that night. I need you to meet me halfway. Her silence wasn't just trauma, it was this profound, terrifying secret she was carrying.
And from that same entry, we get the horrifying recount of the murder night from Alicia's perspective. Theo broke in, tied her up. When Gabriel came home, Theo knocked him out, tied him to a chair, back to back with Alicia.
Theo then reveals his plan. He's going to kill Gabriel. But first, he forces Gabriel to choose. Alicia dies or you die. Your choice, Gabriel. Let's find out how much you love her.
Just horrific. After counting down, Gabriel says, no.
No.
And that's when Theo exposes his true devastating motivation. Mocks Gabriel. Fucking my wife behind my back. Gabriel was the lover of Theo's wife, Kathy.
Oh my God.
Theo's obsession with Alicia was never about saving her. It was about revenge on Gabriel, enacted through Alicia.
Theo points the gun at Alicia, says, now you know the truth. You're better off dead. Gabriel screams.
And then the gunshot. But it wasn't Theo shooting Alicia, it was Gabriel shooting himself.
What?
Theo set up this horrific choice, hoping Gabriel would choose himself, proving Theo's twisted theory about love and sacrifice. And Gabriel did choose himself over Alicia.
Wow. Okay. Alicia's reaction in her diary.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. Gabriel was sobbing, calling her name, but Alicia stayed silent. She writes, "How could I talk? Gabriel had sentenced me to death. The dead don't talk." Her silence in that moment was a response to his betrayal, which she saw as a death sentence.
And then she unties herself, picks up the gun hot and heavy in her hand, walks around the chair, faces Gabriel, his eyes widened, and shoots him. Multiple times. In the head.
So her act wasn't a reaction to Theo's threat directly. It was her final, violent response to Gabriel's ultimate betrayal, his choosing himself over her.
Exactly, a response to the man who sentenced her to death.
So what happens after Theo's identity is revealed to us? His final notes, the other half of the sources you shared, tell his version of the aftermath, his attempts to cover his tracks.
Right, his rationalizations.
He claims he didn't intend for Alicia to kill Gabriel, only to awaken her to the truth of her marriage. Believing he was uniquely qualified to help her through the aftermath, conveniently claims he had no idea about Alicia's history of instability.
He feels personal responsibility, but also wants to expiate his guilt. Classic deflection, as you said earlier.
The sources show he realizes Alicia did recognize him and was even testing him by lying about how Gabriel died earlier. He feels forced to act to silence Alicia forever. How?
He orchestrates her overdose and coma, strongly implies he injected her with opioids.
And he frames Christian, the cynical psychiatrist, uses Alicia's diary, his own supervision notes, constructs this narrative painting Christian as having treated Alicia privately before, giving him a motive to keep her quiet. Inspector Allen starts investigating Christian.
And Theo feels this perverse poetic justice, saying Christian failed Alicia, and he has no qualms about framing him. He's actively destroying others to protect himself.
Jean-Felix, the gallerist, confronts Theo about Alicia leaving the gallery, threatens lawyers. Theo just shuts him down by revealing Alicia note. Alicia gave him her diary. Jean-Felix is stunned. His focus clearly shifts from Alicia's well-being to the lost value of her art.
Figures.
Max Berenson also confronts Theo at the Grove, yelling abuse, holding Theo responsible for Alicia's coma. "You could have killed me," he shouts. "You'll pay for this." He's visibly emotional, showing angry tears.
The sources note, suggesting his feelings for Alicia were way more intense, more complex than his earlier claims of loathing implied. Another character whose stated feelings just don't match their actions.
So many layers of deception.
And so the sources bring us to the final curtain call, almost. Julian McMahon from the Trust informs Theo that Professor Diomedes, the director, has resigned. The world of the Grove is changing.
Theo returns home to his life with Kathy. The sources paint this really suffocating picture. The sweltering house, a temperature battleground, Kathy eating crisps, having gained weight, withdrawn, depressed. He notes the never-ending soundtrack of garbage from the TV that underscores our life in this house. He feels utterly trapped by the life he refused to leave.
And then the doorbell rings. It's Chief Inspector Allen.
The inspector is described as genial, says he was just in the neighborhood, decided to pop in. Accepts tea, but eyes the vodka bottle Theo was pouring. Engages in casual chat, even asking Theo how he takes his tea. Seemingly innocuous details that just crank up the tension.
Totally. The inspector reviews he's investigating the case of the patient Theo mentioned, meaning Alicia. Theo introduces him to Kathy, but quickly directs her away from the conversation.
And from Theo's perspective, his notes end with this dawning realization of why the inspector is really there. After giving Alicia back her diary, Theo had frantically searched her room at the Grove for it. Couldn't find it.
The diary is missing.
The diary contained everything. Alicia's truth, Theo's confession about watching her, his motive, Gabriel's choice, Alicia's final act, Theo's cover-up. It's the evidence, the thing that exposes him completely.
Exactly.
The sources leave us with Theo reflecting on a past violent impulse, picking up a rock, wanting to attack Kathy's lover, but being interrupted. And the material just stops right there. Inspector Allen at the door, the missing diary hanging in the air, the truth finally catching up.
Wow.
What an incredible dark journey through these sources, bringing it all together. We've seen how Alicia's deep childhood trauma, that psychic infanticide, combined with Theo's own unresolved pain, his obsession driven by his wife's affair, how it all intertwined with just devastating consequences.
Yeah. Gabriel's impossible choice, Alicia's violent response, her silence. It all connects back to these hidden truths, these past wounds.
It really underscores how silence isn't just an absence of words, is it? In this story, and often in life, it's a symptom, a shield, a consequence, a choice, sometimes a very loud statement.
Absolutely. And perhaps maybe a lighter takeaway, think twice before checking your spouse's email, especially if you're also treating a silent patient with a complex past.
Good point. It really makes you pause, though, doesn't it? If unresolved trauma and buried secrets from childhood can drive such extreme actions, warp identities so profoundly, how much of our own behavior is truly free will? How much is dictated by that land before memory, those formative experiences deep inside us?
That's a question worth pondering long after we finish talking about this.
Absolutely. And unpacking complex stories like this, finding those hidden insights, that's what we love to do here on The Deep Dive, together with you. If you've enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another one.